The city of Makkah was in turmoil, and tension hung thick in the air. For years, Prophet Muhammad had quietly and courageously spread the message of Islam, calling people to the worship of one true God, challenging the tribal traditions and idol worship that the Quraysh leaders held so dearly. This message of monotheism, of equality and justice, was a direct affront to the pride and power of the Quraysh. They saw it as a threat, an uprising that needed to be stopped. Slowly, the Prophet and his followers became targets of relentless persecution. His companions were tortured, mocked, and beaten. Bilal, radiallahu anhu, Sumayya, radiallahu anhu, and others faced unimaginable trials, simply because they had proclaimed their faith. The Prophet himself was not spared. Stones were thrown at him, people jeered and turned their backs, but he remained steadfast, undeterred by the violence and scorn that met him at every turn. His heart ached for his people, for he wanted nothing more than to bring them the message of salvation, the chance to believe in the oneness of Allah. Despite the resistance, he continued his mission, patient and unyielding. Allah's words in Surah Al-Furqan echoed in his mind, and the messenger has said, "O my Lord, indeed my people have taken this Quran as abandoned." Quran 25:30. It was this love, this passion, that pushed him to persist, even when the people he cherished rejected him with cruelty. But as the years went by, the Prophet knew that the time had come for a new chapter. Allah's revelation arrived, commanding him to leave Makkah for Medina, where the Ansar, the helpers, had prepared to welcome him and his followers. It was the Hijra, the blessed migration, marking the beginning of a new era for Islam. The Prophet knew that leaving Makkah would be a dangerous mission. The Quraysh had already conspired against him, and they would not easily allow him to escape. But with unshakable faith in Allah, he prepared to leave, choosing Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, his dearest friend and the first man to embrace Islam, as his companion. The Quraysh, sensing that their grip on the Prophet was slipping, issued an enormous reward for anyone who could capture him, dead or alive. Word spread quickly, and the most seasoned trackers and hunters took up the pursuit, hoping to claim the reward. The Prophet and Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, moved cautiously through the harsh desert, leaving behind the only home they had ever known, venturing into the unknown with only the assurance of Allah's protection. The journey was not easy. Every step was a reminder of the risks, the sacrifices, the courage required to abandon Makkah for the sake of Allah. But the Prophet's heart remained resolute, guided by the verse in Surah Ash-Shu'ara. So rely upon Allah. Indeed, you are upon the clear truth. Quran 27:79. This verse was his anchor, his reminder that in every hardship, in every trial, Allah was near. As they continued on, they finally sought refuge in the rugged hills of Mount Thar. Finding a small, secluded cave, they entered, knowing that time was running out and that the Quraysh were closing in. Inside, the silence was intense, a sharp contrast to the urgency of the situation. The Prophet and Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, settled in, whispering prayers, seeking refuge in Allah's protection. The reality of the danger they were in filled Abu Bakr with fear, not for himself, but for the beloved Prophet, whose life was precious beyond measure. As the Quraysh men approached, Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, turned to the Prophet, his voice filled with concern, and whispered, "O Messenger of Allah, if they look down, they will see us." The fear was real, the closeness of their pursuers unmistakable, but Prophet Muhammad remained calm, his heart unshaken, a reflection of his absolute trust in Allah. He turned to Abu Bakr with a gentle smile and replied with words that would carry strength and peace across centuries. "Do not grieve. Indeed, Allah is with us." Quran 9:40. This simple yet profound statement was more than comfort. It was a proclamation of faith, a testament to the Prophet's unwavering belief that Allah's presence is sufficient, a shield against every fear, every enemy. Outside the cave, the situation was escalating. The Quraysh men had tracked them to this very spot, and now they stood at the mouth of the cave, ready to capture them. But just then, in a miracle as small and delicate as it was powerful, a spider appeared at the cave's entrance. With swift, instinctive movements, it began weaving a web across the opening of the cave, forming a fragile yet intricate barrier. It's said that nearby, a pigeon nested and laid eggs, creating a scene that seemed untouched, as if no human had entered the cave in ages. The Quraysh men, seeing the web and the undisturbed nest, paused. How could anyone have passed through without breaking the spider's delicate creation or disturbing the eggs? The logic was simple. If the cave had been entered, these signs would not be here, untouched and whole. And so, the men reasoned, the Prophet could not possibly be inside. With frustration and confusion, they decided to abandon the search, leaving the cave and unknowingly sparing the life of the Prophet and his companion. The Quraysh had been foiled by a web, a sign so small yet so powerful in the wisdom of Allah's plan. The words of Surah Al-Ankabut remind us, indeed, the weakest of homes is the home of the spider, if they only knew. Quran 29:41. But here, in this moment, the spider's web became the strongest of fortresses, a shield crafted by Allah to protect His messenger. It was a reminder that Allah's power manifests in the most unexpected ways, turning even the simplest things into signs of His profound mercy and protection. The spider's web at the entrance of the cave became an eternal symbol of divine protection, a testament to the infinite wisdom and subtlety of Allah's plan. For the Quraysh, the scene seemed ordinary, almost dismissive, a web and a nest, things so easily overlooked. But to believers, it was a miracle woven by Allah's hand, a moment in which the small and fragile became mighty, cloaking the Prophet and Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, in a veil of safety. This delicate web, spun by a creature as humble as a spider, served as an invisible barrier that shielded the two most devoted believers in Islam from the threat of their enemies. This remarkable event underscores the beauty of tawakkul, or placing complete trust in Allah. While the Quraysh relied on numbers, weapons, and strategies, the Prophet relied solely on Allah, and it was this reliance that saved them. This act of faith, shown in the Prophet's calm response to Abu Bakr, reminds us of Allah's words in Surah At-Talaq, "And whosoever puts his trust in Allah, then He will suffice him." Quran 65:3. This verse highlights that Allah alone is enough, that He is the ultimate protector for those who sincerely place their trust in Him. The Quraysh, despite their numbers and strength, could not harm the Prophet, because Allah's protection was mightier than any weapon or strategy they could employ. The spider's web reminds us that nothing in Allah's creation is without purpose. Even the smallest creature, acting out of its nature, played a crucial role in the grand plan of divine protection. It's a reminder to us all that Allah can use anything, even the most delicate threads, to bring about His will. This small spider, obeying its creator, became a guardian, an unseen ally in a moment of great need. Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, later spoke of this experience, recounting how he had been filled with anxiety, how he had feared for the Prophet's safety, yet found peace in the Prophet's reminder that Allah was with them. In that dark moment, Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, witnessed firsthand the Prophet's unshakable faith and the miraculous ways in which Allah supports those who turn to Him wholeheartedly. This lesson, encapsulated in the miracle of the spider's web, continues to inspire believers to trust in Allah's wisdom, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The significance of this story reaches beyond that specific night in the cave. It speaks to every believer who has ever felt cornered, every heart that has ever been weighed down by fear or uncertainty. Life is filled with trials and challenges, moments when we may feel as though the forces of the world are against us, and yet this story teaches us that in those moments, Allah's help is closer than we realize. Prophet Muhammad demonstrated that, even in the most perilous situations, Allah's protection arrives in ways we could never anticipate. The Quraysh were confident, powerful, and determined, yet they were stopped by something as simple as a web and a nest. This is the beauty of Allah's wisdom. He does not need grand displays to prove his power. Sometimes, it is in the simplicity of his creations that his might is most clearly seen. As we reflect on this story, we realize that Allah's support is often hidden in the subtleties of life, in the delicate yet firm threads of a spider's web, in the silence of a calm heart, and in the quiet, unshakable faith of those who trust in him. The Prophet's words, "Do not grieve, indeed Allah is with us," serve as a reminder that when we place our reliance on Allah, no harm can reach us unless he wills it. This story of the spider's web, small and seemingly fragile, has withstood the test of time, echoing a lesson of strength and faith to every generation that hears it. It calls us to embrace the belief that Allah's protection can come in ways beyond our comprehension, through means as delicate as a spider's silk, yet as unbreakable as the strongest fortress. This simple act of nature became one of Islam's greatest symbols of Allah's care and protection. A reminder that no matter where we are, as long as we place our trust in him, we are never truly alone. Inside the cave, Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, sat in silence, knowing the risk they faced. With each passing second, the sound of footsteps outside grew louder, closer, and more menacing. Abu Bakr's heart was pounding. His worry wasn't for himself, but for the beloved Prophet, whose life meant more than anything to him and to all of Islam. In that dim, quiet cave, Abu Bakr whispered his fears to the Prophet. "If they look down, they will see us." It was a raw, vulnerable moment, a stark reminder of the human fears that arise even in the hearts of the most faithful. Despite all his strength and faith, Abu Bakr feared that the Quraysh were too close, that they could be captured, and that the Prophet's life was in grave danger. Yet the Prophet, with a calmness that could only come from absolute trust in Allah, reassured his companion, saying, "Do not grieve. Indeed, Allah is with us." Quran 9:40. This statement, so simple yet so powerful, held a universe of faith within it. It wasn't merely a promise of comfort. It was a testament to the unwavering certainty that Allah's presence was enough, that his protection was greater than any threat, and that his plan was beyond human comprehension. At that moment, the Prophet's words cast a wave of peace over Abu Bakr, a calmness that could only come from belief in Allah's infinite power. They both knew, with every fiber of their beings, that no amount of plotting or scheming could harm them unless Allah willed it. In that cave, surrounded by darkness, the Prophet demonstrated the essence of tawakkul, or reliance on Allah. He embodied a faith so profound that fear could not touch him. The silence in the cave became a sanctuary, a place of surrender and absolute trust in the one who is never absent from the side of his servants. Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, realized that, despite the proximity of the enemy, despite their armed pursuit, they were under the protection of the most merciful, who could shield them in ways beyond human understanding. Allah's words in Surah Al-Imran, "If Allah helps you, none can overcome you," Quran 3:160, resonated with a new depth in Abu Bakr's heart as he understood the power and promise behind the Prophet's reassurance. That moment in the cave became a lesson of courage and conviction, one that would inspire believers for generations to come. Meanwhile, outside the cave, the Quraysh men had tracked them to this very spot. They were skilled trackers, hardened by the desert, determined and relentless in their pursuit. They had followed every trace, leaving no stone unturned, fueled by the promise of a reward and the desire to end the Prophet's mission. But as they reached the mouth of the cave, they found something they hadn't expected. A spider's web stretched across the entrance, delicate and unbroken. Its fine threads shimmered in the sunlight, casting a quiet yet powerful message that seemed to suggest no one had entered the cave in days. To add to the illusion, a pigeon's nest rested nearby, complete with fragile eggs, undisturbed and untouched. For the Quraysh, the sight was baffling. How could anyone have passed through the web without disturbing it? How could the delicate eggs have remained intact if someone had entered? The answer was clear to them. They believed no one was inside, that the Prophet and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu must have fled elsewhere. They deliberated, trying to make sense of it all, but in the end, they abandoned the search, never realizing that the protection they had just witnessed was crafted by the very hand of Allah. This miraculous moment, in which a spider's web and a pigeon's nest turned into a barrier stronger than walls, reflects the beauty of Allah's wisdom. Allah can use the smallest of His creations to achieve the greatest of protections. It is a reminder of Surah Al-Baqarah, and Allah is the best of planners. Quran 2:16. The Quraysh men, despite their expertise and resources, were halted by something as simple as a spider's web, a creation they would normally overlook, a creature they would never consider. Allah turned their own logic against them, using nature itself to protect His messenger and his companion. The Quraysh left, defeated not by force or strength, but by the subtlety of Allah's design, which showed that even the weakest of His creatures could become an invincible shield when used in His plan. Inside the cave, Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu were unaware of the miracle taking place just outside, but they knew without a doubt that Allah's protection was with them. For believers, this moment in the cave became an eternal symbol of Allah's care and protection, a story that reminds us of the limitless ways in which He can guard those who put their faith in Him. The web, fragile yet unbroken, served as a sign that Allah's power does not always manifest in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet, unassuming forms of creation. As Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu waited in peace, it was a moment that cemented the lesson of tawakkul, teaching us that true faith means placing absolute trust in Allah, regardless of the apparent danger. This simple spider's web, woven by an obedient creature of Allah, became a fortress that repelled an army, showcasing the strength of Allah's plan and the ease with which He can protect those who turn to Him. It is a call to every believer to trust in Allah's wisdom, to find solace in His presence, and to remember that even in the most perilous situations, His help is near, arriving in ways that might be unseen or unexpected, yet always perfect in timing and purpose. The spider's web became more than just a shield for that moment in history. It transformed into an everlasting lesson of faith and reliance on Allah. For Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, sitting in that cave, surrounded by silence and trusting fully in Allah's mercy, it was a pivotal moment of surrender. With no weapons, no army, and no physical barriers, they were shielded by a creation as delicate as a spider's silk, reminding them that Allah's protection is far beyond human comprehension. It was as if Allah had wrapped them in a cloak of invisibility, using the smallest creature to manifest His divine will. The Quraysh, who had been so determined and so powerful, were halted by a web, completely unaware of the profound wisdom unfolding before their eyes. In Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah compares the weakness of the disbelievers to that of a spider's web. The example of those who take allies other than Allah is like that of the spider who takes a home. And indeed, the weakest of homes is the home of the spider, if they only knew. Quran 29:41. But in this instance, Allah turned the weakest of homes into the strongest of fortresses, using the spider's web as a means to protect those who place their trust in Him. This scene, both powerful and serene, exemplified Allah's promise to protect His servants who rely on Him with full conviction. It became an emblem of divine intervention, a reminder that Allah's assistance arrives when it is most needed, even in forms we may not anticipate. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu later spoke of this experience with awe, recalling how his initial fear transformed into tranquility, enveloped by the Prophet's words and Allah's unseen protection. This event became one of the greatest testimonies of tawakkul in Islamic history, showing that no situation is beyond the reach of Allah's mercy. It teaches us that faith in Allah is not merely theoretical. It is a living, breathing certainty that sustains us in our most challenging moments. Prophet Muhammad embodied this certainty, showing Abu Bakr and all believers that Allah's help is real, tangible, and present, even when it may seem invisible. For generations, this story has been told to remind us that Allah is closer to us than we can imagine, that His help and His protection are constant companions for those who trust in Him. In times of difficulty or fear, we are encouraged to remember that Allah's support can come from places we may least expect, that His wisdom works in ways beyond our understanding. The spider's web was just a small part of Allah's infinite design, but its impact was vast, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary, turning weakness into strength. This story calls to every believer to hold on to faith with resilience, to know that in every trial, Allah is there, crafting a way out, weaving a protection that may not be seen, but is undoubtedly present. For the Prophet, that spider's web was a shield crafted by the Creator, a reminder that Allah's power cannot be limited or challenged by any human force. And so, as we navigate our own lives, facing fears or challenges, this story of the cave and the web calls us to trust fully in Allah, to rest assured that He is with us in every step, guarding us in ways both seen and unseen. The story of the spider's web and the miraculous protection that unfolded at the mouth of the cave is more than an inspiring account from the past. It's a profound and timeless reminder of how Allah intervenes in the lives of those who place their complete trust in Him. For the Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, this experience was a powerful manifestation of divine support, one that they would carry in their hearts as a reminder of Allah's nearness in times of danger and uncertainty. This moment, where a delicate, barely visible web held back an army of determined enemies, symbolizes that Allah's aid does not always come in loud, grand gestures, but often arrives in quiet, subtle ways that reflect His profound wisdom. The Quraysh, who had armed themselves with all the power, strategy, and hatred they could muster, were ultimately defeated by something as delicate as a spider's web. This miracle is a vivid illustration of Allah's words in Surah Al-Baqarah. And whoever relies upon Allah, then He is sufficient for him. Quran 2:286. It underscores the reality that Allah's support is limitless, that He can turn even the weakest of creations into an impenetrable shield for those who have faith in Him. As Muslims, this story serves as a reminder that Allah's protection surrounds us, even when we may not see it. Just as the Prophet and Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, sat in the cave, placing their reliance on Allah, we too are encouraged to lean on our Creator in moments of fear, uncertainty, and challenge. The Prophet's unshakable trust in Allah in the face of danger teaches us that no matter how overwhelming a situation may seem, Allah's plan is greater than any force that may be against us. This trust, or tawakkul, is an active commitment to rely on Allah, to surrender our fears and anxieties to Him, knowing that He alone has control over every matter. The Prophet knew that his life, his mission, and the safety of his beloved friend were all in Allah's hands. And by surrendering fully to that reality, he found peace and calm, even when others might have been overcome by fear. Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, whose heart was filled with worry for the Prophet, learned a lasting lesson in that cave, that Allah's presence and protection are real, surrounding those who turn to Him with sincerity and devotion. This miracle in the cave continues to echo across time, reminding us that Allah's help arrives in ways beyond human understanding. It encourages us to recognize the signs of Allah's protection in our own lives, however subtle they may be. Just as the Prophet and Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, were unaware of the miracle unfolding at the cave's entrance, we too may be unaware of how Allah's mercy and care protect us from dangers we do not even see. Allah's words in Surah At-Tawbah: "If Allah should aid you, no one can overcome you." Quran 9:40, take on a profound meaning when viewed through this story, emphasizing that Allah's help is always near for those who rely on Him. The spider's web and the pigeon's nest became symbols of this divine aid, transforming the ordinary into an extraordinary display of Allah's love and protection for His chosen messenger and His loyal companion. For us as believers, this story invites us to reflect on our own lives, to remember that every trial we face, is an opportunity to strengthen our reliance on Allah. When we encounter hardships, when we feel cornered or vulnerable, this story calls us to anchor ourselves in faith, knowing that Allah's help is close, arriving in ways we may not see or understand. The Prophet's reassurance to Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, "Do not grieve, indeed Allah is with us," is a message that echoes to each of us today, urging us to cast aside our fears and to place our trust in Allah's protection. It reminds us that no force, no power, and no challenge is greater than the will of Allah. And just as He turned a fragile spider's web into a fortress, He can turn the smallest of means into a shield for those who hold on to Him. The story of the cave and the spider's web is a timeless call to let go of our fears and to embrace a faith that is alive, resilient, and steadfast. It encourages us to find peace in Allah's promise and to remember that, even in our darkest moments, His light is near, guiding and protecting us with a care that knows no bounds. We are reminded of the Prophet's hadith, "Whoever places his trust in Allah, He will be sufficient for him," Sahih al-Bukhari. This hadith complements the story of the cave, teaching us that Allah's support is not conditional on the strength of our circumstances, but on the strength of our reliance upon Him. And so, as we carry this story in our hearts, let it inspire us to deepen our faith, to remember that Allah's protection is as close as a breath away, and that even the smallest acts of nature, like a spider weaving its web, are part of His perfect plan, safeguarding those who trust in Him. And so, dear brothers and sisters, the story of the spider's web at the cave entrance is more than a tale from the past. It's a vivid reminder of the strength of faith, the power of tawakkul, and the unwavering support that Allah grants to those who rely on Him completely. Just as Allah transformed a fragile web into a mighty shield, He can turn any small act, any quiet moment, into a miracle for those who trust in Him. This story encourages us to remember that no matter the hardship, no matter the obstacles we face, Allah's wisdom and protection are with us, often in ways we cannot see. Let us carry this story in our hearts, finding strength in the Prophet's calm words to Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, "Do not grieve, indeed Allah is with us." May it remind us to let go of fear and to embrace a faith so deep that it brings calm amidst the storms of life. May we trust in Allah's plan as the Prophet did in that cave, and may we find peace knowing that Allah's help can come from even the smallest, most unexpected places. With a heart full of trust, let's continue forward in life, relying on the One who never fails to protect those who believe.